Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Sha. Hari Om Tat Sat. Man Shiksha Text 4. Asad Varta Vishya Vishidramatisa Vasva Harani Gata Mukti Vyagra Nashinukila Sarvat Mangilani Api Taptva Lakshmi Patiratam Iti Vyoma Nayanim Braje Radha Krishna Swarati Manido Tvam Bhajamana. Translation. Oh, my dear brother mine, please abandon altogether the prostitute of contemptible mundane talk, which plunders the entire treasure of pure wisdom. You must unequivocally give up hearing all talk of impersonal liberation, which, like a tigress, devours your very soul. Furthermore, please abandon even the attachment to Lakshmi Pati, Shri Narayana, which leads to Vaikuntha. You should live in Braja and worship Shri Radha Krishna, who bestow upon devotees the precious jewel of love for them. So, having spoken of you can say the adhikar for those in the path of Rag Bhajan in the first 3 verses. So now in 4 verses, 4, 5, 6, and 7, it speaks about the obstacles to bhajan, those saboteurs of the life of bhajan. So in Shastra, there are 2 types of injunctions, basically. The prescriptions and the prohibitions, the vidis and the nishedas. Just like we hear, especially in discussion of Vaidhi Bhakti, Smartavya Satatam Vishnu, Vismartavya Najatuchit, Sarva Vidhi Nishedasur Etayo Eva Kinkara. So the vidis and nishedas, all of them, Sarva Vidhi Nishedasur, all the vidis and nishedas, prescriptions and prohibitions, they are servants, Kinkara. They are servants of one vidhi and one nisheda. The one vidhi is to always remember Krishna, and the one nisheda is to never forget him. And so all the vidhis and nishedas are servants of these 2. Sri Vishwanath kind of unencouragingly says that if you break this one vidhi, then that is like breaking all the vidhis of the Shastra, which is like, that sounds kind of heavy. And if you transgress the prohibition, that is like transgressing all the prohibitions of the Shastra. So one should always remember Krishna, and one should never forget him. And of course, this is relevant even to the life of a Raganuga Bhakta, whose essence of his life is Krishna Smarana. Janam Chashta Prishta Nijasamihita. The essence of his life is also Smarana. So this injunction is important for the Raganuga Sadhaka as well. And therefore, there's a vidhi there for Raganuga Bhaktas as well. There's nisheda there also. That's the idea here. In other words, just because I'm on this path of spontaneous sadhana bhakti, as it's sometimes described when translated into English, it doesn't mean there are no vidhis and no nishedas for the Raganuga Bhakta. There are. This vidhi and nisheda that applies to the Vaira Bhakta also is relevant for the Raganuga Sadhaka. And so Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, he is giving us some vidhis and nishedas. So first, the obstacles to bhajan are described first. In the last few verses, he'll describe those things which nourish bhajan. But first, the obstacles are described. And this technique seems to be applied everywhere. Also, if you study Upadashamrita, And the first thing described in verse 2 are the obstacles, the saboteurs of bhakti, those things which destroy bhakti. Shabir bhakti vinashiti, 6 things are mentioned. Then only after that, these 6 things which nourish bhakti, Shabir bhakti prasiddhiti, then those are mentioned in verse 3. So basic sense here is that even if we're doing the good stuff, if we're not avoiding the saboteurs, then our bhajan will not be able to grow, will not be able to prosper. So many devotees, they speak about this lack of evolution in their sadhana. But a lot of devotees also, we don't avoid the things that aren't good for us. Even when we're doing the positive things, we may be chanting 16 rounds, etc. So we're doing what we're supposed to be doing on that side, but we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing on the negative side, the side of avoidance. And as a result, our bhajan remains static or unprogressive. Stagnant is the word I was looking for. So therefore, there are always some instructions about what is to be avoided or what obstacles that need to be overcome so that the life of the devotional creeper can blossom with minimum obstruction. So starting with verse number 4, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami is speaking about those obstacles. So the first obstacle he brings up, Asar Bharta Vesha Vrishi Jamati Sarvasva Harini. So he says Asar Bharta Vesha. Asat Bharta means topics of the Asat. So Sat means that which is true in all phases of time. What is that verse from Bhagavad Gita? Nasato vidite bhava, na bhava vidite sataha. So that which is sat, it has no abhava. So it means things which are truly existing, they have no absence of existence. And those which are asat, then they have no true existence, na bhava. They have no true, that means they're here today and gone tomorrow. So that which truly exists has no absence of existence. That is called sat. So there should be sat varta. There should be topics of the truly abiding substances. For followers of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that means Krishna and his Shaktis. There should be talks about those things. Vedyam vasavam atra vastu shivadam. Tapatraya umulanam. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vasava Vastu is to be known. So the Vasava Vastu is Krishna and Krishna's Shaktis, like the Tatastha Shakti, Swarup Shakti, and Maya Shakti also. Topics of Maya Shakti are also welcomed. But topics about what the Maya Shakti produces and preoccupation with those objects that Maya produces, that is called a Satvarta. So that Satvarta is compared here to a prostitute. And what does this prostitute do? Rishija, she stills. What is she stilling? Mati sarvaswa harini. She is stilling the sarvaswa means like the jewel of mati. So the word mati means like intelligence. I saw it translated in some places as pure wisdom. The word mati means the seed of Krishna consciousness, which is given by the sadhus at the beginning of Krishna consciousness, right? Krishna Bhakti Jama Mula Hai Sadhu Sangha. The root cause of Krishna Bhakti is Sadhu Sangha, right? We have heard from Kaviraj Goswami. And I'm pulling up a verse here. Just thinking of it now. So when he states this is actually coming from the mouth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Sanatana Goswami and the narrative that Kaviraj Goswami has given us. So after saying this, Sri Mahaprabhu quotes 3 verses describing how this Sadhu Sangha is the root cause of Krishna Bhakti. And the first of the 3 verses he quotes, hold on, play it out. I kind of forgot this verse. It's like a super important one too. Bhava Prabhargo Brahmato Yata Bhavet Nashatar Yachuta Sat Samangama. So when the wandering of the jiva has come to an end and it is time for liberation, then at that time he gets sadhu sangha. And when he gets sadhu sangha, satsangama yarhi, when he gets sadhu sangha, tataiva sagato, precisely at the moment where he gets to sadhu sangha, paravareshe twai jayate riti, what takes birth, jayate, which appears or takes birth, is reti or mati, for the Supreme Lord, who is the Lord of the high and low. That mati is coming through the gateway of the sadhu, sagato. So sagato means coming through the gateway of the sadhus, sat. Or sagato means that God is the goal of the sat. In either case, by their association, satsagama, what takes birth is reti, or reti is taken here as mati, the consciousness of Krishna, precisely at the moment when you get sadhu sangha. So Mahaprabhu has quoted this verse as pramana for the idea that sadhu sangha is the root cause of Krishna bhakti. So you get that reti. So in the commentary, Jiva Goswami, when commenting on what this reti is, he says this reti is the ankura, is the seed of mati, the seed of Krishna consciousness, which will fully blossom into Krishna reti by the proper process of sadhana bhakti. So sadhus are giving that mati, the seed, ankura, the seed of reti, or mati, the awareness of Krishna consciousness. But then you have to protect it. So as Mahaprabhu says to Rupa Goswami, after the Guru gets the Bhakti Lata Bija, the seed, also using the word seed there, the seed of the Bhakti Lata, then you should sow it in your heart. Heart should be like soil. You put the seed inside the heart, and then you water it with Shavana Bijal, and then you should protect it with a fence on all sides. The fence of Sadhu Sangha. Why the fence of Sadhu Sangha? Because you were told to water it, right? So water it means you have to hear from sadhu, right? Shravanadijal, hearing from whom? Sadhu. What kirtan you have to hear? That is also from sadhu. So you're surrounded by sadhus who are also watering the seed on one side. And on the other side, they are protecting it from obstructions, such as committing aparad and so on. So in this way, you have to protect the reti or the mati, which is like, this is the priceless jewel. This is the jewel that will, or you can say the currency that will give us entry into the spiritual reality and perfection. So this jewel must be protected from all sides. So what has to be given up? Rishrija means to give up. So you must give up this prostitute of a satvarta. So just as a prostitute, she takes the money of a foolish man in an appealing way, right? She's attractive to the man in certain ways. And due to being a victim of her attractive qualities, his wealth is stolen. I had one devotee here in New York. She came from a very rich family, but she said that her father spent a vast majority of their wealth on prostitution. It was very interesting to hear that. It said most of the wealth got spent in prostitution, of course, led to divorce and the breakup of their family because of it. So one becomes a victim of the attractive qualities of the prostitute, she steals the wealth. So this is our wealth. The wealth is that mati, that little bit of Krishna consciousness, that if we nourish it properly, will blossom into the flower and fruit of bhava and prema, respectively. So it needs to be protected. So in order to protect it, something has to be given up. So what is that to be given up? Asad varta vesha. You must give up this prostitute of asad varta. So again, asad varta means the topics about the products of Maya, the things that Maya produces, which are here today and gone tomorrow. Then those topics are to be given up. According to our acharyas, this refers to the topics of dharma, artha, and kama. All the commentators are quoting this verse. So when Raghunath Goswami was able to finally, or what Raghunath Das, when he was finally able to escape household life and take shelter of Mahaprabhu in Puri, so Mahaprabhu put him under the care of Saru Damodar Goswami. At one point, at one point, Raghunath Das Goswami asked Mahaprabhu for personal instructions. So Mahaprabhu said, I've already put you under the shelter of Sadhu Damodar Goswami. I do not know more than him. So whatever you need to learn in terms of Krishna consciousness, you can get from Sadhu Damodar Goswami. But I can give you a little advice. So now, mind you, the specific context of these instructions is Raghunath Das Goswami's seeking guidance for the life of a renounced sadhaka, you can say, a renounced sadhu. So that's a very specific context here. But these instructions are taken as universally applicable for all sadhakas, whether they're renunciates or not. The way the acharyas at least use these couple of verses that Mahaprabhu speaks to Raghunath Das Goswami are used universally across the board, although the specific contexts are instructions for renounced holders. So for those who are particularly renounced, these instructions are absolutely critical. But also for those who are interested in Rag Bhajan, these instructions are also absolutely critical. So here, Mahaprabhu says this very famous verse, Gramya Kata na shunibe, Gramya Bharta na kaihibe. So na shunibe, do not hear Gramya Kata. And na kaihibe, do not speak Gramya Kata, Gramya Bharta. So don't hear Gramya Kata and don't speak Gramya Bharta. So the word Gramya means village. So Gramya Kata or Gramya Bharta means village prato. So you know what is village prato. When I got to Vrindavan, Vrindavan is like a little village. So when I was in Vrindavan in February, some of the first things I heard was, everyone's business. Meeting some certain friends after not seeing them for 3 years. And first thing that came up was this is going on, and this one is doing that, and the other one is doing this. And this is called village prato. It's very hard to resist. And Sridhar Swami, the original commentator of Srimad Bhagavatam, he says this Gramya Kata, Gramya Varta specifically refers to the topics of Dharma, Artha, and Kama. So these topics of Dharma, Artha, and Kama, they are to be given up because they're a prostitute which will steal away the mati, the consciousness of Krishna. It's very interesting that even the principles of Dharma are counted in this regard. If you study first chapter Adi Lila also, so there Kaviraj Goswami is speaking about the mercy of Sri Gaur Nitai. Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu and Sri Nityananda Prabhu are compared to the sun and moon that have arisen simultaneously and go to Desh. So the sun has moon, they have two, that's the characteristics. Number one, they remove darkness. Number two, they illumine objects so that you can see them. There's two characteristics of the light of the sun and moon. So the sun and moon of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Nityananda Prabhu, they remove darkness and they reveal certain objects. So what is the darkness that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu removes? So Kaviraj Goswami says he removes the darkness of Kaitava Dharma. This is the darkness that eclipses the soul. The light of the soul is eclipsed by the darkness of Kaitava Dharma. You understand? The light of the soul is like a little lighter. So suppose you're in some dark forest, you cannot see anything, and you turn on the lighter. Will that light do anything? What will that light do against such deep darkness? Not much. Even the light of our phone hardly does anything. It gets swallowed up by the darkness. It's kind of an interesting way of putting it. But if you point your phone light towards the darkness, it's as if the darkness is swallowing up the light. It's such thick darkness. And that tiny light cannot compete against such darkness. So the light of the soul gets swallowed up by Kaitava Dharma. So this Kaitava Dharma begins with what? So Kaviraj Goswami informs us, Kaitava Dharma begins with Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha also. He'll include that. I'm keeping Moksha out because that is the next line. So topics of Dharma, Artha, and Kama, they are the Asat Varta, which steal away the mati. As people get more and more preoccupied with those subject matters, then they lose their Krishna mati. You understand? Just like devotees nowadays also, there's like a whole wellness industry. It's become an industry now. The wellness industry. And so many self-help gurus and coaches and therapists there have emerged to, fill the void that has come because of the ignorance with how to live in this world and with moral integrity. People do not know how to live in this world with moral integrity. And so they're suffering the consequences of that ignorance. And so now all these gurus have popped up to basically describe the principles of Dharma, right? Because through those principles of Dharma, they'll be able to live a nice life they can prosper, materially speaking. So those are the topics that people have now become interested in, because there's a whole industry now very popular amongst influencers and YouTubers and all that. So now our devotees, they've started presenting Krishna consciousness in a way that it sounds very similar to self-help. Krishna is just like some sort of self-help principle. He's not the God to whom you surrender everything, but he is the God who can, if you follow this, that, and other, your material life will be very good. And maybe this is a sort of preaching tactic or bridge program or whatever it might be. I don't know. And I don't want to I don't think there's a right way to preach per se, so I won't comment so much about that. But just to say that these principles of Dharma, how to live in moral integrity in the material world, as interesting as those subject matters are for our empirical mind, they are also a satvarta. And you can see devotees can lose their Krishna consciousness, their Krishna mati, Krishna bhakti rasabhavita mati, right? Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur also quotes this verse. Krishna bhakti rasabhavita mati. The mati that is infused, bhavita, with Krishna bhakti rasa. Prabhupada used this term and coined the phrase Krishna consciousness. So Krishna consciousness actually means Krishna bhakti rasa bhavita mati. That is actually the phrase Krishna consciousness. We want the consciousness that is infused with Krishna bhakti rasa. Devotees can lose the enthusiasm to grow that seed which has been given by sadhu sangha in the beginning, because they're doing asatvarta, including the topics of dharma, how to live with moral integrity in this world. That starts to outpace the topics about Krishna, Harikatha, Krishna Katha. And so devotees lose their mati. That is also a prostitute. This prostitute is very attractively dressed. For those who are in the mode of goodness, this is a sort of prostitute that they like. For those who are in the mode of passion, they like the more, licentious sort of stuff. And those in the mode of ignorance, God knows what they like. It's just horrible. But for those who are in Sattva-guna, they like this prostitute. What is that prostitute? Topics about moral integrity, dharma. They like that prostitute. And they will try to fuse Harikatha with those topics, make it seem like as if one. And then you also lose your Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati. That way you also lose it. It gets stolen. And Krishna consciousness only becomes meaningful if you, talk these things. They don't want to hear it unless it's, how is this going to help me in my life? Wait, whoa, I thought this was supposed to be about Krishna. Anukuyena, Krishna Anushilana. What is favorable to Krishna? Now, what is favorable to you? What is favorable to you is if you satisfy the senses of Krishna. That is what we say fundamentally. Anukuyena, Krishna Anushilana. But now you become interested in how Krishna can help you. And that becomes this sort of gold standard of Krishna. No, that is a prostitute, asadvarta. So we have to be careful of this prostitute. Otherwise, you cannot do bhajan. Why you cannot do bhajan? Because the mind will be arrested with all these topics. The mind will be so arrested with these topics that there will be no room for Krishna. And the actual pure topics of Krishna consciousness cannot have any entry. One other nice verse from Srimad Bhagavatam that I like to quote in this regard. This asatvarta, speaking, also means hearing. So as Maharu said, don't hear it, also don't speak it. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta commenting on this said, you do more harm to yourself by hearing asatvarta or gramya katha. And you do harm to others by speaking gramya katha. So this instruction, don't speak, also means don't hear. Because if you hear, you do harm to yourself. So that should be a no-brainer. You don't want to do harm to yourself in your own bhajan. But if you speak, you also do harm to others. You harm yourself because by speaking, you also hear. We generally actually hear ourselves more than we hear others, honestly speaking. So by speaking, you also are hearing, so you do harm to yourself, but you also do harm to others. So don't speak, and also means don't hear. So in this regard, there's nice instruction coming Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 50. I always quote this verse when this subject matter comes up. The context is Brahma has been asked by the Devatas about the darkness that is eclipsing the universe, because Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha are about to take birth. So one great darkness eclipses the universe. So the Devatas go and ask Brahma about that. So Brahma gives the backstory about how the Kumars cursed Jaya and Vijay. So in the course of developing the story, he gives a beautiful description of Vaikuntha, how the Kumars were seeing that beautiful Vaikuntha. And then he puts in a verse about who can attain Vaikuntha and who cannot attain Vaikuntha. So first he speaks about those who will not obtain Vaikuntha. So this is verse 3:15-23. Who will not obtain Vaikuntha? So this verse he is speaking. Yanavrajantia gabidho rachananuvadash trivanti ye nyavishaya kukata matigni. He says, so those who hear anya vishaya means other topics, other than what? Topics other than that personality who kills the Agasura demon. Agabida means the destroyer of sin, but as a reference to Agasura. So you hear topics other than those which describe the killer of Agasura, Krishna. So these topics are related to the sense objects, Anya Vishaya. Vishaya means the sense objects. So this is Kukata. This is Kukata, bad kata. Kukata, Kuyogi. You're a Kuyogi. Oh, Kuyogi. Why are you Kuyogi? Because you do Kukata. You're hearing the bad kata, so now you Kuyogi. Your life will be finished. Your life of bhajan, that is, will be finished. How? Matigni. So look at the word he's using. Matigni. The same word is coming. Mati. The wisdom, the consciousness, the intelligence. Matigni means it's destroyed by that Kukata. If you hear it, it is destroyed. Same thing that Raghunath Das Goswami is saying. He said, Asat Varta Vrisha, Veshya, Vishicha Mati Sarvasvanavi. She will steal the jewel of Mati. Here he's saying the Mati will be destroyed. Yastu Shuta Hatabagar Nibra Atasaras. Those unfortunate men who hear these things, the Atasaras, the essence is stolen from them. That means the essence that came from hearing the good stuff, the proper Harikata, the Krishna Kata, the essence they got from that gets stolen by the Kukata, which is compromising their intelligence. These persons are forcibly thrown down into the darkness of ignorance. Such is the power of this Asat Varta. So now we're in trouble. In this age of Kali, we're in big trouble because they give phones. So now you have access to Asat Varta 24 hours a day practically. Sometimes devotees lose sleep because you say, oh, I didn't get good rest last night. How come you didn't get good rest last night? What were you doing? That you didn't get good rest last night. Oh, many times because the phone is a big formula now in age of Kali. So these are like walking dispensers of Asat Varta, destroying or stealing the jewel of Mati for Krishna consciousness. So this means there be no question of bhajan. Because again, the bhajan, especially of the Raghunath Sadhaka, as we've been saying throughout, is that your mind has to do Anushmriti and your tongue has to do Sukirtan. I've been stressing on that these last few classes. I think it's a good thing to remember. This is the essence of all advice given by Rupa Goswami. So if you do the Asat Varta, all the impressions of that clutters the mind. And therefore there can be no Anushmriti. Anushmriti cannot happen because it's being obstructed by the obstacles of Asat Varta. So this should be given up, this first obstacle. There are different types of Asat Varta there mentioned. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this essay on Prajapal mentions like 7 types. I don't remember all the 7 types. Worldly talks, gossip, blasphemy, argumentation, debate, ungodly talks, talks of impersonalism, I assume. Maybe 7 are there he mentions. Of all the types of Asat Varta, of course, the most dangerous is the blasphemy of others, the public discussion of the faults of others. This one is the most dangerous, especially if you're living in the association of devotees, because the faults of others means the faults of devotees. You go on broadcasting that, and then it becomes aparad, which destroys the mati. that Krishnamati, that seed of Krishna consciousness, completely destroyed. So this is the first instruction. I guess it's also just in relationship to the essence of Rak Bhajan, means that the tongue should be engaged in Sukirtan. So your tongue is doing Sukirtan, how can it do a Satvarta? So since this Sukirtan is so critical to the life of Rak Bhajan, so here Raghunath Das Goswami is advising that such a person should give up the Asatvarta. This is a prostitute which will steal your wealth, that currency that will allow you entry into the life of bhajan, that will be stolen from you. So don't do it. So because Asatvarta refers specifically to Dharma, Artha, Kama, or begins with Dharma, Artha, and Kama. So what about moksha? Moksha is good talk. Moksha means liberation. This is a good thing to talk. So here he gives injunctions against that also. Kata mukti vyagya nasrinu kila sarvatma gilani. Nasrinu, don't hear that kata. What type of kata? Mukti. That mukti kata, don't hear it. That mukti kata is like a vyagya, a tigress. The tigress will kila sarvatma gilani. This tigress will devour the entire Atma, Sarva Atma, all the Atma. This Mukti will devour all the Atma. Because Atma can mean body, Atma can mean mind, Atma can mean soul. So the whole Atma will get devoured by this Mukti Kata. You understand Mukti Kata? This Mukti Kata means the desire for salvation, because we are suffering so much in this material world. There's so much suffering going on in this material world. We ourselves are also experiencing so much suffering. So naturally, the desire for mukti comes up for everyone. It is irresistible. It is ineluctable. Ineluctable means unable to be resisted. Even if you are a sadhaka, if we are neophyte sadhaka, then the desire for liberation comes up periodically or regularly. Oh, I'm suffering so much. People also commit to suicide to get freedom. They want moksha. They're suffering so much. Give me moksha. On death is released out of punishment, they'll commit suicide also. Incidentally, this mukti is also compared to spiritual suicide. Srila Prabhupada is often compared to spiritual suicide. The desire for freedom, the desire for liberation. This is a tigress which devours the entire Atma. First, it devours the psyche by causing us to be preoccupied with our own freedom, our own liberation from suffering. And then afterwards, if you shall attain the fruit of mukti kata, the fruit of mukti kata is actual merging into the Brahman. If you obtain that goal, you'll be forever cut off from the life of devotion. So this is the Sarvatma Gilani. Our commentator is saying the life of the devotee, not the devotee, excuse me, the life of the soul, or the soul of the soul, the Atma of the soul, the Atma of the Atma, is Jivera Sarupoy Krishna Nityadas. So this is the Swarup of the Jiva. The Swarup of the Jiva, Jivera Sarupoy Krishna Nityadas. He is the eternal dasa of Krishna. That is his soul, his Atma. But you'll be forever cut off from the actualization of that potential and beatitude if you get the Sayuja Mukti. If you merge into the Brahman, then you're forever cut off from Sevananda, the bliss that comes from Seva to Bhagavan. Because liberation is permanent. I know devotees, ISKCON, they like to think that it's not. We've heard it in a certain way that we think that it is not permanent. But this is why the acharyas are more heavy on mukti than on bhukti. At least if you're doing Gramya Kata, you'll be roaming around in samsara. So there's a chance for bumping into sadhu sangha and then actualizing your potential in devotion to Krishna. But if you get mukti, you're forever cut off from that. So therefore, Rupa Goswami says, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is quoting these verses also, Bhukti mukti sprihayava pishachi hrivartate taba bhakti sukhasyatra katama buddhayobhavet. That the desire for bhukti and mukti is like a witch, pishachi, a demoness hunt inside the heart. As long as tabad bhakti sukhasyatra, so long as such a witch is there, how can the happiness of bhakti come in that place? And not at all possible. Katama buddhayo bhavet. How will the happiness of bhakti manifest in a heart that is afflicted by the spells of the witch of bhukti and mukti? Having said that, Sri Krishna Taranamboja, Nivritta Seva, Nivritta Chaitasa. He says, for those whose consciousness are experiencing the bliss of seva to the lotus feet of Krishna, Esha Mokshaya Bhaktanam, those bhaktas particularly criticize mukti, because mukti is forever averse to the happiness of seva. So why Rupa Goswami specifically criticizing mukti? And after that, he quotes 50 verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, which basically criticizes mukti. Why mukti? Including verses that describe mukti as worse than the attainment of hell. How can mukti be worse than the attainment of hell? Hell is so much suffering. Mukti is freedom from suffering. So how can mukti be worse than the attainment? Because in hell, you're still roaming around in samsara, so there's still a chance to come face to face with sadhus. Sadhus even go to hell sometimes. But in mukti, finish, forever cut off from that. In mukti, there will be no harikatha. Because there's no tongue to speak harikatha, there are no ears to receive harikatha. You're forever cut off. Also, if you attain mukti, there are no karma. So how can you take birth? You cannot take birth without karma. If there is no karma, there can be no birth. Which body you get is according to your previous karma, right? But if you attain mukti, there are no more karma, no aparabdha karma, no parabdha karma. So now there's no question of taking birth again in the material world. You have no karma, so you're forever cut off from the opportunity of actualizing the bliss in Sevananda. So the spirit of, bhaktas is that this is better you go to hell. That is the Bhav purport. Technically speaking, if you want to be technical, Brahmananda is considered superior to anything material. That's also why those who attain Brahmananda never return to the material world, because Brahmananda is superior to anything material. But for bhaktas, they say that actually this Brahmananda compared to the ocean of Sevananda is like hardly even a drop. It's like a drop of a drop, hardly. So better you go to hell. This is the spirit of bhaktas. So here, this Mutikata is like a tigress, which is said to devour the entire Atma. First, it devours your faculties by making you preoccupied with desire for freedom from suffering. You're not even prepared to accept the suffering for Krishna Seva. That is not Anupayana Krishna Nushilana. And then after that, it devours your soul by you become merged into that Brahman light. Not literally merged, you still exist as an individual entity, but you attain forever, you attain identification with that Brahman forever. And so in that way, your soul is devoured and you're forever cut off from this bhakti yoga. So don't hear this mukti katha. Don't hear it. Don't speak or hear about dharma artha kama. That is useless thing for the life of Rag Bhajan. That will not do anything for your sukirtan. Also, do not hear this mukti katha. That one is very dangerous. So this import is coming. Final last line, he says here, api taktva lakshmi patiratam iti vyamanayinam. Also, api, also you should give up reti, that affection or for Lakshmi Pati, the Lord of Lakshmi, Narayana, Sri Narayana, who is there in that Vyomanayanam, in that opulent realm of Vaikuntha Loka. Well, you should give up reti also for Lakshmi Pati. This instruction is all. This is also considered an obstacle in Rag Bhajan. Having divided affection for, again, I say divided affection for Radha Krishna on one side, Lakshmi Pati on another, Sitaram here, another one there. No, this should also be given up. At least if you want to enter into that domain in Braja. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he's giving this Siddhanta from Sri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. After Rupa Goswami criticizes bhukti and especially mukti, quoting several verses from Srimad Bhagavatam mostly as pramana for this, as I just described. He says there are 4 types of mukti that are not so unfavorable to the life of bhakti. Those 4 types of mukti are Samipya mukti, Salokya mukti, Sharshti, and Sarupya mukti. These 4. They're not so unfavorable. These are the types of muktis that are there existing in Vaikuntha Loka. Sarupya mukti having same form as Lord Narayana. Basically, Sarupya, similar form, same form. Sharshti having same opulences, powers as the Lord. Samipya mukti, living in the association of the Lord. I'm missing one. Sharshti, I said, Sarupya, Samipya. Salokya, living on the same planet as the Lord. So these muktis, they're of Vaikuntha, they're not so unfavorable. So he says these 4 types of muktis, they have 2 divisions. Here, Srila Bhagavatam Thakur is giving this Siddhanta from BRS. These 4 muktis have 2 divisions. One division is Sukhaishwaryotara mukti, where the mukta is interested in his own happiness and opulence. Another is Prema Sevotara mukti, where there's a predominance of the desire for Prem Seva, but the little bit of the Sukha Aishwarya thing is also going on. So it's still adulterated. That is the idea, according to Rupa Goswami. There's still some mix there. This mixture is not like the contamination of the material world per se, but for the culture of unalloyed bhakti, Shuddha bhakti, which is being promoted by the Goswamis, by our Acharya, this is also considered an alloy. You can call it as a spiritual alloy in contradistinction with a material alloy. So he says here that those who are ekantina muktas, exclusive bhaktas, they give up both Sukhaishwaryotara mukti and also Premsevotara mukti. Both these they reject. Because their minds have been stolen by Govinda. Tatapi ekantinam shreshta Govinda Tritamanasa. Because their minds have been stolen by Govinda, these ekantinam are considered shreshta. They are considered the best. And then he says this line, this is very important. Even Shri Shrisha Prasadopi, even the mercy of Narayana, or forms like Dwarpadish Krishna, that is added in the commentary, even these forms cannot attract the minds of these Ekantinam Bhaktas of Krishna. So example given there in Madhya Lila, Karyas Goswami tells a story of the gopis and Krishna having Rasa Lila one night. Krishna hid himself. The gopis are looking for him. So at one point, Krishna manifests a Narayana form. And when the gopis saw that Narayana form, it was actually their Krishna, but he was making trick. He manifested a Sri Narayana form. The gopis had no attraction to that Narayana form. They said, Namaskar, Sri Narayana, have you seen Krishna? This is an example of this Ekantina Muktas, these exclusive bhaktas. Their minds have been completely stolen by Govinda. Even the mercy of Sri Narayana or other opulent forms of Krishna cannot attract their mind. So these are considered the best. So this is the purport of this third line, according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that we are being encouraged to become Ekantina Muktas, those who are having exclusive fixity on Krishna and Braj. And therefore the last line, Ita Braja Braje Radha Krishna Saratimani Dotvam Bhajamana. So you worship here in Braj that Radha and Krishna. Why? Swarati Mani Dhau. Because they will give the money, the jewel of Swarati, Rati to themselves. They will give that Rati. So if we are Akantinam Bhaktas, then we are only interested in that jewel we want. What jewel you want? So you have to decide for yourself what is your pole star, what is the goal of your Krishna conscious life. We've been speaking about it a lot these days. That without identifying the true goal of your life, there will be no guiding star for your spiritual life. So your sadhana will be reduced to ritualistic formula. It will have no happiness in it. You have to know what is your North Star. That jewel that you're willing to sacrifice everything for. I often tell this stupid story. I'm sorry, I think this always comes up. From growing up, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where I've told it many times, but because it just made such an impact to my psyche. You know, the protagonist, one of the turtles, is facing the antagonist, and they're fighting on a precipice, a cliff, and they're fighting for a jewel. The protagonist needs the jewel to go back to their timeline. And the antagonist wants the jewel for his own, selfish and gratificatory purposes. So they're fighting for this jewel. So finally, at one point, the protagonist realizes that he's not going to win the jewel from the antagonist directly. So what he does is that he just takes his sword and knocks the jewel out of the antagonist's hand over the precipice. And without even thinking, the antagonist just jumps off the cliff to grab the jewel. Of course, he jumps to his doom. So growing up as a kid, seeing that, I always wonder, how is this fellow able to jump like this? Like, what a crazy fellow. But I'm using this example in the positive sense that we have to know what is the hill that we're willing to die on, so to speak, the jewel that we're willing to sacrifice everything for, the precipice from which we're prepared to jump in our attempts to satisfy that desire to attain that jewel. So who can give that jewel? That is Radha Krishna Sarati Manoda. They can give that jewel of Swarati, devotion to themselves. So we should become Ekanti Nam Bhaktas, completely fixed on that jewel and worshiping them, giving up Asat Bharta, giving up Muktikata, and even giving up Rati for Lakshmi Pati. That doesn't mean going out and disrespecting all that, but this purport has been given by Rupa Goswami, that we're trying to emulate, because it's the path of Rag Bhajan, right? So you're trying to follow the Ragatmikas. Ragatmika Anushrita Ye. Those who are Anushrita, following in the wake of the Ragatmika Bhaktas. So this is their mentality. And so it has to exist in our sadhana if we can hope for it to manifest in our sadhya. So this instruction is also coming for such bhaktas. This is also considered as an obstacle to our devotion. So we'll pause here, having done our best to describe this particular verse and see what's going on here. So we'll pause here. I think this is good for now. Okay, so Chaba, what form the souls achieve in mukti to experience sat and chit? What form? There are no form. So the soul is formless by nature. We've mentioned this many times in the class. The soul is anu. Everyone knows this. Everyone has heard this a million times. That the soul is anu. The Supreme Lord is vibhu. So anu generally translates as atomic or atom. But as we mentioned many times in this class, the word anu means it can't be reduced to any parts. So even the material atom in science has parts to it. It has a electron, neutron, protons, and whatever. They have further parts. So the irreducible unit of consciousness is known as jiva. Irreducible means not having parts. So the soul is actually formless by nature. So it doesn't attain any form. It attains identity with Brahman and the Brahman Jyoti. Actually, it cannot really merge because, as Krishna says, nasato vidite bhavo na bhavo vidite sata. So that thing which exists can have no abhava. It can have no non-existence. So anything that exists has always exists and will always exist. So a soul merging into Brahman would mean the extinguishing of his existence. So that's not possible. So whatever exists always existed and will exist forevermore. So that merging into Brahman means to attain identity with Brahman. That is the meaning there. And he has no form there. The souls are formless. I think in the Brihavatamrita someplace when he's describing mukti topics, he says that the souls are kind of like doing the seva of lighting up the Brahman Jyoti. I think he says something to that effect. I'll have to go and see it and see Sanatana Goswami's commentary there. I don't remember it precisely. I definitely heard this from devotees, but I never double checked it myself. So, but there's no form there. There's no form there. I mean to ask that form or no form will be different than who attains Vaikuntha Mukti. Yeah, so in Vaikuntha Mukti, there's Sarupya Mukti, right? They have form like Narayana. Souls who attain impersonal liberation, so attain Vaikuntha Mukti, other souls who attain spiritual ball of the Lord. Yeah, so in impersonal liberation, no form. In Vaikuntha liberation, they have Sarupya Mukti, form like Narayana. And Krishna's abode of Goloka having three parts, Dwarka, Mathura, and Gokula. So they attain forms suitable to the relationship they have with Krishna and one of the four rasas. So these are the different forms that are possible for the soul. Okay, Mukunda has a question, and then Athena has a question.
Hare Krishna. So this mood that the Krishna devotees have of down talking mukti. Mukti means merging into Brahmajyoti specifically here. But in this verse, he also then talks about even the attraction for Lord Vishnu as within the same category. And I'm just wondering, because if somebody gets liberation to Vaikuntha, that's also an eternal quote unquote damnation. So from like a Krishna Bhakta spirit point of view, wouldn't Vaikuntha and Brahmajyoti be in the same category, or is there still is Vaikuntha slightly better?
Vaikuntha is better because there's seva happening there.
Okay.
Right. So when there's Sukhaishwarya Uttara Mukti, that means also they're rendering Prem Seva, but there's some Sukha Aishwarya desire there. If there is the Prem Seva Uttara Mukti, so that means they're doing Prem Seva, but they also like the opulences of the spiritual world. But they're rendering service there, and they're also experiencing some Sevananda, for sure. But that will not get us into Braja. So that is a concern of this rock mark individual. So this instruction is coming for him, for that person. So it is millions of times better than mukti, impersonal mukti, because there is service to Bhagavan happening. Of course, even in some cases, there may not be service in all cases, but they are living in the proximity of the Lord. They would have darshan of the Lord at least on occasion, and so on. So this is vastly superior to mukti. But it is, I don't want to say contemptible, although I have seen Gaudiya Vaishnavas speak somewhat contemptibly about even Vaikuntha. But that is again in the spirit of making us ekantina. They want to make us ekantina. So in view of that, this sort of talk sometimes comes up. But yeah, so this talk sometimes comes up in that regard. But actually, this instruction is for the rock mark person who they're trying to make ekantina. So otherwise, it is okay. It is okay. Yeah. It is not so bad.
Yeah. And then kind of just like a follow-up question is that, for those of us who have not yet actually experienced like the real bliss of serving Krishna, especially in like in a Raganuga fashion, is it appropriate or inappropriate to kind of parrot this same idea of like, yeah, muktis, like down talking mukti, down talking Vaikuntha, for someone who's not even mature enough to have actually experienced that that's not worth pursuing. Is it worthy of down talk, or should, if somebody's pursuing some other, path of liberation,
they should down talk on the strength of their Guru Varga.
Yeah.
I have heard from Guru Dev like this. In that way, they take a respectful position in relationship to such high topics. Actually, mukti, if you meet a genuine mukta, it'll be very impressive. Like if you were to meet like a Shukadev Goswami or the four Kumars before they got Krishna Bhakti, they're not to be criticized. They're exalted personalities, obviously. So we have to, if we show down talk, we have to down talk on the strength of the Guru Varga. This is how we have learned from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, from 6 Goswamis, from Guru Dev. He has taught all these things. So I am saying on the strength of that what is this mukti? This is like hellish for those who are interested in this life of bhakti, bhajan to Krishna. So we can speak like that on that strength. But if we start to think that we have, are like these bhaktas and speak contemptibly, that will be very dangerous for us. That will be coming in the category of asat varta, criticizing. And that is not very healthy. Even when we criticize materialists, So devotees criticize the materialists, but they have no compassion for them also so much. Of course, they say, well, I'm distributing the book, I'm talking about Krishna, therefore I'm automatically showing compassion. No, do you actually feel compassion for them though? You're doing your duty of distributing the book or giving the kata, that is okay, but do you actually have any feeling for them that they're suffering? And that from that view, you are saying these things. And if you really are feeling their suffering, you might also feel how they can digest what you're saying so that they can be benefited. But if you're not thinking about any of that, you speak even critical of the karma, that is also blasphemy. That is not sadhu ninda, but it is ninda. And according to Chaitanya Bhagavatam, if you read it, this ninda, what to speak of sadhu ninda? He said this ninda itself can destroy the mind and its capacity to do bhajan. Just doing ninda of any type. So that's very interesting. And I think also when I was reading maybe Narayan Maharsh's commentary, he brings up this point also. Just doing ninda, this is the worst type of asad varta. So you mean sadhu ninda? No, ninda. Ninda is the problem. So one book I definitely recommend all devotees to read. It can kind of be depressing because of how far off the mark many of us might be, but it's called Obstacles in Bhakti by Vinod Bihari. Vinod Bihari Babaji. So he's one, he's become popular now a little bit in Vrindavan. Very sweet, humble lifestyle from what I've heard. And I experienced him one time also. A few years ago when I was in Braj, we went to Barshana. He does like kirtan at like 10 o'clock at night. And then he does his bhajan, like his Nam Japa Vrata from 5 in the morning to like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, he's not a joke. And Sachinanda Maharaj is particularly very fond of this particular devotee. So he has one book that is put out called Obstacles in Bhakti. Very powerful book, very sobering, very inspiring in some ways, and like more sobering. And half of the book is just about doing ninda. This is the obstacle in bhakti. Don't do ninda. So if you don't have any kripa in your heart, even if you criticize materialists, that is ninda also. And I've seen many devotees kind of lose ground in Krishna consciousness because of ninda. They get too much into the ninda. That is a sadvarta vesha. That is a prostitute that will steal away the mati. Absolutely. So we should not do like that. But if you have to give some class and you want to represent the ideas that have been given to you by the parampara, then what else can you speak? You're not speaking another way. So you have to hold that in your heart and say, on the strength of the Guru Bar, I'm saying like this. But otherwise, you have respectful attitude. We have one devotee you remember, Deep, or Sean. His name was Sean that time. He got initiated. So he was really into the Mayavad thing. He had met some Mayavad gurus right before he met the devotees. So somehow that Mayavad thing, Sarvatma Glini, swallowed up the whole Atma before we could get to him. So he was with the devotees for a year, saying the ashram. He liked us. He loved us. He was just one of the guys, but he was completely attached to this mukti thing. So the devotees would always criticize him. He was always like one of the butts of the jokes. Now, you probably remember. They were always, especially Acharya Nishta, would be always cutting jokes on him like hard. And he would take it gracefully, he would take it. But, it'd be kind of like, hurtful also in some ways. So after every class, he would always be like having doubts and asking me questions. So I was speaking a respectful way about mukti, saying that anyway, he's already been Sarvatma Glini, he's already been swallowed up by mukti, kata. And so I would always speak respectfully about mukti in terms of the more ontological truth of mukti, and not so much hammer our bhakti view of mukti like that. But when I would give class, I would speak with our acharyas and so, because we're trying to create ekanti nam bhaktas. We ourselves are trying to become ekanti nam. We want to generate that. So I have to speak in that way. So in that way, we balance it out.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I was unmuted. But yeah, thank you. Also, I just wanted to say I also got to meet Vinod Bihari Babaji once, and he's definitely he's one of those people that we actually showed up there. It was me and Namras. We showed up at the time that he was doing his bhajans. So then they just had us wait outside. He's sitting in like his kutir, right. And they made prasadam for us, made like fresh prasadam for us, and just had us wait. And he's definitely one of those people who's like just just being in his presence, you feel something. So yeah, anyway, thank you for sharing that recommendation.
Check out that book, Obstacles in Bhakti, and prepare to be sobered up. Hard. Okay, Athena has a question, I think. Mother Bill maybe has a question also.
Hare Krishna. Sorry, I'm a little bit on the move, so if I get cut off, I'm in the elevator. Okay. So actually I'll pause here. This is somewhat related to Mukunda's question. And I just wanted to check because I know it depends on the context and who, say, the speaker's talking to. But I know, you're usually preaching like the highest, which is like in what the acharyas say, Kaitava Dharma is, anything other than pure devotional service to Krishna. So even this moksha or, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, we would consider that under Kaitava Dharma. And, but just to clarify, I mean, from an ontological perspective, like if we just say, and you've heard it too, that the purpose of humans are these kind of four limbs, but the Dharma, Artha, Kama is supposed to really help then funnel or like support the moksha aspect. And so I just want to check because, even we've talked about this, like our literature is part of moksha shastra. So it is liberation, and everything we just said, like living on the same planet as Krishna, in association with Krishna, like that is mukti. It is, and I know like moksha has a broader like context in that it could also mean the impersonal Brahman, and maybe that's for the most part the understood meaning of it. But I just want to clarify from an ontological perspective. One, is that still true that those three Dharma, Artha, Kama really, like we're still in the moksha category, and it is okay because you can do pure devotional service to Krishna when you are liberated. Like when you're in Goloka, you are liberated. So I guess I just wanted to double check that even those statements from an ontological perspective is still okay, that like even what we're seeking is within the moksha category.
Moksha Shastra means Shastra like Upanishads related to, often thought of as related to attaining that Brahman realization. And so our Shastras, Puranas, but specifically Srimad Bhagavatam, they're called another category, Bhakti Shastras. So because you could say Bhakti is the post-liberated condition, it could be subsumed within the liberation category. In other words, you could say there's a Mukti category, and then that has several divisions, and Bhakti is one of the divisions. So in that context, you may describe it like that. But the way the word Moksha Bad or Moksha Shastra is used is in relationship to Brahman. And therefore, moksha is also criticized as Kaitava Dharma for this reason, because of its, what they call as the conventional use of the word. So words, they have what's called these conventional uses, and they have these etymological uses. So the word mukti, conventionally used, refers to that Brahman love, the attainment of Brahman realization. And so the word moksha, often encountered in sacred texts that we study also, is criticized because that is how it is generally understood. But if you want to break down some of the more details, well, actually Bhakti is supposed to liberate state. So if you've given that qualification, then you can explain it in a different way. And of course, the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, they're called as Purushartha, which means these are basically like the duties of men in this world. First duty for the, empirical man is Dharma, Artha, Kama. And as he realizes the futility of that, then moksha, this is also the duty. Then there's Purushartha Shiromani, the crest jewel of all Purusharthas, which is prema. And for that is pure bhakti dharma, to get that Purushartha Shiromani. So because of Adhikar Beta, the differences in Adhikar, you'll find instructions for all these things in scriptures. So Ravinath Das Goswami's instructions are meant for those who have bhakti adhikar, right? And specifically those who are on the path of Rag Bhajan. So then these instructions are coming in that particular context. For those who don't have this adhikar, then another instruction meant for them. That is okay.
Thank you. I'm gonna let that process just a little bit. And so I love, yes, the Purusha Artha, even the Mukti aspect. So it's not wrong. And ultimately, even if preacher had mentioned that the three like Dharma, Artha, Karma, Dharma, Artha, Kama, feeds into moksha, that's still, it's still correct, but it's not according to, I guess, what our goals are then. Like it depends on the context that we're speaking. Because
Sure.
okay. And but then on that, okay, you know what? This is perfect. Thank you. I'm just gonna let this sink in. I'm a little distracted right now. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
I think, Gal, you wanted to say something? Mother Gal? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I had trouble unmuting. Yeah, a couple of things about impersonal liberation. I mean, your answer probably would be that, we have free will, but still I need to ask, if a person becomes, quote unquote, merges with Brahman and they lose their chance for devotional service, I have a problem accepting that Krishna would allow such eternal condemnation.
How is it condemnation? It is called as Brahmananda, not Brahmanarka. So that Brahmanarka is how devotees look at it, who are experiencing this, the bliss of seva. They say like that. But actually it is called Brahmananda. So there is no condemnation.
Well, it's because Krishna knows that there is a higher bliss.
There's always a higher bliss. If you attain Vaikuntha, there's a higher bliss than that. There's a higher bliss than Dwarka also, a higher bliss than Mathura also. Even within the Braja Rasa, there are higher bliss available. Higher than the Dasa bliss is the Sakya bliss, the Vatsalya bliss, and then the Madhurya bliss. Within Madhurya, there's so many gradations of bliss. So much bliss is available. There's always going to be a higher bliss in that sense. So there is also the lowest category of bliss, Brahmananda. So there is no condemnation.
What feels like condemnation to me is
good.
The idea.
That's because that means the Krishna conscious preaching has worked very well on you, as it has on all of us, I suspect. We feel it as a condemnation means that we've received the preaching of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. That is the meaning there. And we are feeling that. That is very good sign that the preaching of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas is effective. And now we feel it. So, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, after he becomes convert, Krishna conscious devotee. So one morning, Mahaprabhu comes to visit him with some prasad. And previously, he would not have taken the prasad without life first bathing, this and another. But immediately he takes the prasad. So Mahaprabhu comments about this. Previously, you would not have touched this, but now, seeing it as a Mahaprasad, you're immediately taking it as the Lord's mercy. Yes. And then he closes verse. Tate nukam bansu kshamikshamano bhujana evat makritami paka navag vapubir hridadana mase jiveto yo mukti padesa dayabha. So instead of saying mukti padesa dayabha, he said, he translates the word to bhakti padesa dayabha. He didn't want to, so Mahaprabhu said, hey, that is not the word jiveto yo bhakti padesa dayabha. The verse is jiva mukti padesa dayabha. Why you change mukti? So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, I don't want to hear this word mukti. Whenever I hear this word mukti, my mind immediately goes to that Brahma love. And that is contemptible. And Mahaprabhu was very happy to hear this. He said, actually, the word mukti pade, because the word pade also means feet. So it refers to the feet of that Lord who gives liberation. So this is not an impersonal mukti. This is impersonal mukti. And so that way, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was satisfied. Anyway, point of bringing this up is that the preaching of Mahaprabhu was effective on Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, that he felt, contempt for that mukti. But actually, mukti is still a Brahmananda. It is still a type of bliss. So if you feel that way, all I can say is it's a very good sign that the preaching of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas has worked effectively. That is the desired result that they want.
Yeah, but still, as I said, Krishna knows that higher exists. Why would he cut a person off from that?
Well, why not say that in relationship to the Dwarkavasis being forever cut off from Braj Bhakti?
But yeah,
Or
but
the
that's another thing.
Vaikuntavasis being cut off from
Well,
Braj Bhakti?
I have the same question. I mean to say, are they, in other words, if a person has a natural relationship with Krishna, right?
Okay.
And like their original relationship by nature, right? And they have come short of that realization.
Now, who are
Why
you
would
thinking of when you say that? I'm thinking of the Dwarkavasis, the Vaikuntavasis. They have a natural relationship from beginningless time with Krishna. They can never
that's
fall
okay.
short of that relationship. So you're talking about
for
the
them,
souls.
I'm talking about people who have maybe attained a certain level of spiritual existence, but have not yet come to their what do you call it, Swarup City?
No, so that language you're using, what do you mean by attain a certain level of spirit? If they have attained mukti of any type, or they've attained dwarka or mature or goloka, they've attained exactly what they were aiming for. Because you don't attain what you don't aim for. So if they attain what they aim for, they feel the bliss of that attainment, then they will feel that there's nothing more for them to attain. They are satisfied with that. So you'll see you'll see the prayers of Bhishma, Uddhav, all of them. They acknowledge the superior bliss of Gopi Bhav in their prayers, for example. But they are happy with their attainment because that was exactly in accordance with what they were aiming for. So whatever sort of bliss realm you attain, whether it's Brahmananda or it's, Premananda and Braj, whatever, that is exactly in accordance with what you were aiming for. So you got what you aimed for and you're experiencing the bliss of that also. So you will be satisfied there. So there is no like being forever cut off or anything. You got what you aimed for.
Okay, so then therefore, maybe I'm working under a misconception because I know that, there are people of all the various spiritual realms that for them, that's the highest thing. That I understand. But I also was thinking that there was such a thing as, for example, attaining, Dwarka, when actually, your Nitya Swarup is supposed to be in Goloka.
No.
Huh?
So the Jivas, we don't have a Nitya Swarup. You will get the Swarup that you aim for. So this is related to that fishy subject matter that's so popular these days about is bhakti inherent or not inherent, circumventing all the complications that may come up in that sort of conversation. The simple reality is that you get what you aim for. Yadiyata urukaya vipavayanti. I'm quoting this verse so much these days. It's a very important verse. Or Srila Narottam Das Thakur says, whatever is there in your sadhana, that's what you'll see in your sadhya. The only difference between the two is that one is unripe and the other is ripe. That is the only difference. So you don't get what you don't aim for. And you don't have a nitya swarup in relation to that reality. You'll get the swarup that you are hoping to get by your sadhana bhajan. So you aim for Brahmananda and you get it, then you experience the bliss of that attainment, then you are satisfied there. If you aim for Dwarka and you get it and you experience the bliss of that attainment, then you are satisfied there.
I unwittingly headed into these murky waters. I didn't mean to go there. But anyway, just one last small thing. Jiva is Anu, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so how do I reconcile that with the fact that we get, in Vaikuntha, we get, Narayan type bodies or in
Yeah,
Goloka.
but that's the point. You get a body. Just like you get a material body in Maya. So you get a spiritual body by the Swarup Shakti. And you attain identity with that form. Just like the moksha, the person who attains mukti, he attains identity with Brahman. And he stays there forevermore. So you attain identity with this spiritual Swarup. And that is your identity forevermore. Just like, although we may say philosophically, I'm not this body. You can never not think you're not this body. It's impossible. By sattva guna, if you increase it to a sufficient amount of degree, you can have a sense of awareness of the distinction. But you're basically in the body, so you're practically one with it. So you become one with the spiritual body. You have complete identity with the spiritual body, and leelas are carried on forevermore in the spiritual domain with that spiritual body. So you attain a spiritual body. This is mentioned in first canto, chapter 6, verse 28, when Narada Muni says he was gifted or received his spiritual body. Srila Jiva Goswami is quoting this particular verse. And the Priti Sundara, when describing the Siddha Deha. So, like this, that is reconciled. The Anu Jiva attains identity with the Swarup of spiritual world.
So, what would you say is the distinction between saying that I am not this body, yet recognizing the distinction between oneself and the body?
Well, we say it, we don't recognize the distinction. And if you recognize the distinction because of Sattva Guna, you can live in the world with detachment. So that is a gift of that recognition. So you live in the body is still doing its things, but you live in that body with the detachment. How Krishna speaks about it in the first 6 chapters of Gita. When you move your arm, you still feel like you're moving your arm, but you're not detached because you have awareness of the soul's distinction in that body.
So in the spiritual world, we lose such distinction.
Yeah, you think you practically become that body. You have, just like as I said, when you're in moksha, you attain identity with Brahman. So you attain identity with the spiritual body. So it is practically you. And their philosophy is not on the table. You've already accomplished the fruit of all philosophy in the form of attaining a spiritual existence. So
But we never stop being Anu, though.
No, we never stop being Anu. Correct. We are still Tatasha Shakti, but now we are imbued with the internal potency. You attain the pinnacle of your Anu potential.
But the soul never changes. So are we not imbued with the internal energy now?
No, we're not.
Oh, is this going back to the other thing?
It's somewhat related. It's somewhat related. The Jiva is Satasha Shakti, and the internal energy is a totally different Shakti. So if we were imbued with the internal energy now, we wouldn't be in Maya. That is the whole idea. Because the nature of the internal energy is that it dispels Maya. Maya Vyudyasha Chit Shakti. The whole part of the nature of Swarup Shakti is it dispels Maya Shakti. So if we were imbued with Bhakti now, Swarup Shakti now, then there could be no question of being in Maya. But we are in Maya, so we're not imbued. We're trying to become imbued with the internal energy. Our soul has the potential for such endowment, so to speak. And now we're trying to activate that potentiality. And that is what Sadhana Bhakti life is all about.
Okay, yeah. I think this goes back to the original.
It's related, yeah. It's definitely. So you guys can read that book, Inherent or Inherited. That's very nice. For me, it was because this has never been an issue for me. because I was like, oh yeah, bhakti is another energy, the soul is another energy. So the two are not, inherent in each other. Cleared that up for me like 2 minutes. So it's never been an interesting topic for me, honestly. And so when I was reading the book, the whole first part of the book is just all the teachings of our acharyas on bhakti's non-inherence. Not at all interesting for me. So I was like, this is an obvious one. Like there are quotes and references, but that part wasn't even interesting to me at all, because I was like, what's the difficulty? You just said these are three ontologically different categories. So what's the difficulty understanding that one isn't inherently other? And then the second part of the book is just like reconciliation of how our acharyas have talked about bhakti with what the founding acharyas have said about the topic. That was a little bit more interesting, because he's trying to like do this work of reconciliation between all the different ideas. That was a little bit more fun part of the book for me to read. But you can read it. I think it could be a good book, the first part, for those of you where this might be more of an issue. It could be a fun read.
But by whom, you said? By whom?
It's by Padmanabha Swami. You can see it. They have a Kindle version on Amazon.com also. Inherent or Inherited. So he goes into all these bhakti, prema, siddha deha, all these things are brought up there. It's very interesting for those for whom this might be important.
Yeah, he's the one who gave lecture recently, and was it Ipsy or something?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. And check out his book for those for whom this may be a very interesting topic. Okie dokes. It's Akadashi today, I think, at least here in New York, it's Akadashi. So have a happy Akadashi.
You know, the Bhakti calendar, the Bhakti Center calendar says it's tomorrow.
Oh, for real? I looked up one on my phone. Okay, let me see what prasadam they prepared, and that will settle it for me.
Okay.
Okay. Hariyom Tat Sat, everyone. Good day. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Raghunath Das Swami ki jai. Shri Gopa.
Jai.
Oh.